The discourse around the Super Mario Bros. Movie is way too obsessed with the presumed critical disparity of a site that I'm really surprised anyone still pays attention to. But it does make a good jumping off point, so I'm going to do exactly the same. I do think that the critic percentage is a mite low, which is not as offensive to me as the fact that both Secret Life Pets movies are higher than this, to say nothing that the Beauty Beast Mulan reboots are somehow above 70, but most of the reviews are just middling that happen to fall right below Rotten Tomatoes cutoff. And not a ton of the good reviews were 100% raves either. In either case, many critics write their reviews to the audience they believe is reading it. In other words, other adults. If they don't think that a family movie has much adult appeal, they will say that. Call me crazy, but if this is a fan service film for a single franchise, and you're not a particular fan of that franchise, it's a little understandable if you didn't enjoy it. Not to repeat myself too much from a past video, but defending this movie with "it's a kid's movie," then why are you getting so emotionally butthurt over the fact that other fully grown adults aren't as emotionally shackled to this brand as you are? And what really frustrates me a lot of times with this kind of internet discourse is how closely the lines between the good and the bad reviews really are, because there's usually consensus on a lot of similar points. The animation is good, there's a ton of Mario fan service, and the story is relatively simple / the characterization could use some work. Which is not to say that there aren't some negative reviews that I find baffling. Like, there are zero grounds for any declaration of superiority of the exactly 30-year-old train wreck where nothing holds up that isn't being supported by the world's largest supply of magenta-tinted melted sand. Or these guys just like it because it's insane, which I get. But before we get into that, I need to thank this video's sponsor, Factor. Some of you may have noticed we live in stressful times, so might as well get the most ease and convenience out of the most inevitable of your stressors, the need and desire for tasty, nutritional sustenance. A completely human way to say that. Factor is a food delivery service of meals that are already prepped, so you don't need to worry about spending time or energy planning, prepping, or cleaning, and the meals are delivered right to your door, so it's flexible for any schedule or lifestyle, as well as cheaper than most takeout and certainly with any rideshare delivery. Can you believe the taxes on some of those things? All while offering a large rotating variety of home-cooked meals that can accommodate any diet, vegetarian, keto, vegan, to guilty pleasures. So if you want to get delicious quick meals right to your door, use my link or go to factor75.com and use the code POGSELLMAY40 to get 40% off your first purchase, plus 20% off your next month. That's POGSELLMAY40 to get 40% off your first purchase. Now, when talking about negative official reviews that do irk me, those are the ones that call this movie low effort. You have negative knowledge of the history of video game adaptations, which admittedly is a factor to how well this movie is being received. Even as VG adaptations have improved recently, for decades the film industry's tactic for adapting geek-oriented properties, especially video games, was a regular practice of mostly cheap, bare-bones attempt of taking for granted the fact that the fans are gonna see it regardless, so we don't actually have to try that hard, and otherwise trying to bland it down for general audiences. And I still say the major accomplishment of this film is the decision to make it fully animated from a major studio and not another live CGI hybrid where the character that everyone came to see has to split his screen time with a Hollywood Ken doll that nobody cares about. Seriously, the whole ugly Sonic design fiasco pretty much hit the nail on exactly how much Hollywood doesn't respect video games as a medium. If this is low effort, it is twice as embarrassing that it took Hollywood this long to do something this basic. Now, of course, what the fans want is its own trap. It's one thing to expect Sonic to look like Sonic, but then for fans to blow a gasket when a character wears an outfit that is in fact canon, it just isn't the canon that they wanted at that exact moment. And even on the subject of its fan service, there are ways to do that better than others. Aside that several accomplished narrative films, even some of the best animated films of all time, can technically double or be qualified as reference films, I remember when this cheesy fun versus corporate advertising was the debate around Space Jam Legacy. However you feel about that movie, Legacy makes Mario look like a goddamn masterpiece. Mario succeeds in making the Mushroom Kingdom side-scroller feel like a living, breathing place. Legacy just stuck a bunch of movable GIFs in the background. But then you have something like last year's Chip and Dale film, another mostly background Easter egg hunt, who granted was able to put more into their background gags, as well as their world building, but what turned out to be a plus and minus was how Chip and Dale technically could have been replaced by any nostalgic characters, heck even completely original characters, and nothing about its mockbuster toon trafficking ring story would have really changed, which for better or worse did make for a kind of interesting story, even if its technical execution left something to be desired. The Mario movie may not have been that dark, but even without it, the animation alone does make it a superior product. And that's another point. For many critics, their opinion shifts depending on what they're consciously or unconsciously comparing the movie to. I admitted that I gave Chip and Dale credit because in my mind I was comparing it to all of the other CGI hybrids, especially Tom and Jerry. But people who were comparing it to the recently premiered Sonic probably thought it was crap. This is where the accusations of comparing Mario too much to Pixar might have some validity, but not to Pixar specifically. Even if you took Disney completely out of the equation, theater animation generally has reached an expectation of quality visually and narratively. And in this case, some might have been comparing it to the most recent animation premiere that was also a classic feeling adventure story that still managed to have some depth. Critics might be underestimating how good this animation is with its design and its timing, but it's because it's industry standard. Every major animation studio basically has this. The only major difference here is that these are nostalgically recognizable characters. However, other studio movies, on top of looking good, also usually have something narratively interesting going on, and Illumination usually doesn't. And finally getting to the part where I share my opinion on the film, if it hasn't already been assumed, I am no Nintendo devotee. I am not a gamer, I wasn't raised with an NES, but I have played a decent amount of Smash Bros. And Mario Kart on multiple social occasions, particularly every Thanksgiving. And my followers know that I am no Illumination apologist.
We are the Lords of Illumination, and I don't think you can talk to us this way. Okay, it's cool.
And I did have a decent amount of fun with this. I mean, let's be fair, I had ingested things, but it's mostly thanks to just how well animated it was across the board. But this was still a very Illumination script. But to me, the problem is not that it's simple or for kids, that I actually see as a contributor to its success. It's also true that a lot of films in recent years have been on such a twist and subversion kick that every once in a while doing something classic and straightforward can feel refreshing. Besides, at this point, we know that when even mainstream animation does try to have those sentimental moments, they often fall into their own tired cliches that we're exhausted of. The third act breakups, the misunderstandings, the liar reveals, that this movie largely avoids. I mean, they do have a third act breakup, of course they do, but it's not an argument and a storm off. Dende knows it didn't need a commentary on generational trauma, nor does it have to be a reflection on ego and mortality. I am not asking for that. What I'm asking for is basic character introduction and payoff. To have dialogue that's engaging, to have scenes start and end organically, which was one of those things that was more disappointing as it went, at least till the middle, because the first 10 minutes was actually very solid and well paced in terms of introducing their characters, laying out their presumed arcs, establishing their chemistry, and presenting their first conflict, which you'd assume would be reflected later in the film. But then when they get to the Mushroom Kingdom, all of a sudden they're burning through scenes and character moments to get to the good stuff. It's Toad taking a complete stranger directly to his leader 2 seconds after meeting him at a time when the kingdom is in danger. It's Peach delaying her plans to protect her kingdom from invasion to train some rando. Mario says exactly one line to Cranky King and then suddenly he's in an arena. And it's the world's most cringy unnecessary line where DK tells Mario that Peach would never go out with him when she's right there, because they don't trust the audience to be able to pick up on their chemistry. You know another movie made exclusively for the under 10 crowd? Captain Underpants. Also not excessively complicated or deep, quite as visually vibrant and not from as big a brand, but it is definitely more tightly written. So none of this, it's for kids, so I'm not allowed to have standards. Purely on a script level, Illumination has yet to produce anything as charming, clever, or funny as a single episode of Bluey.
I don't want a volleyball line lesson. I just want an ice cream.
And then the point that pretty much everyone agrees on was negative was, well, the pop songs. was the fact that Luigi was not in the movie more. I do thinking having Luigi kidnapped is a perfectly fine way to take the story. I like that the story's goal is for the brothers to find each other again. Besides, if they were together the entire time, no way of knowing if that chemistry would have lasted the whole movie long, or if they would have felt the need to contrive some inter-brother conflict like jealousy or the third act breakup at some point. But what we absolutely needed was more instances to cut back to Luigi in prison for at least some token attempts at escape, and to give him more time for his established courage arc. And personally, it would be even better if the two of them had stayed together a little longer when they first entered the kingdom, before Luigi gets kidnapped. It's not impossible that some critics found some elements of this story wanting. But even people who like this film admit to many of these problems, they just don't intrude on their enjoyment of the film. Which I do get. Like I said, I certainly found it fun enough. Peach was honestly a little better than I thought she was going to be, even if her vocal performance was predictably underplayed. I was really worried for a Lucy Part 2 dumbass in distress situation where a female character is given abilities, but then they suddenly forget that they have them when they need them. So at least this time, they remembered they had them. The idea that she seemed to be semi-attached to Mario right away, just because he's human, and she doesn't know where she comes from, is a decent enough motive. And I think all they needed to do to perfect that was to push it further, having her curiosity become a more exaggerated and more cartoonish part of her persona. Even better, putting her in a position where her curiosity is somewhat at war with her wanting to be a responsible leader. And Mario doesn't even need an arc. He's a classic underdog story whose strength comes from his endurance. All he needed to do was succeed, which is exactly what happens. But you think you couldn't have fun and also complete character arcs? Oh right, and the pop song Needle Drops, which is twice as baffling because the arrangements of the original Nintendo themes are really good. But then all of a sudden we have Take On Me in the Donkey Kong world for no reason. And at this point, I just have to know, is Illumination like under contract? Are they legally obliged to have X number of songs from Universal Music Group per movie? Or was it literally just the orchestration missed a deadline? I mean, at first I could understand No Sleep Till Brooklyn, but I thought that would be a contrast between the modern world using modern songs and using the Nintendo themes for the Mushroom Kingdom. But apparently that didn't happen. And even though I still don't love the practice of celebrity voice casting, as I expected, the voices here are fine. Peach being the weakest and needing a little bit more personality, but that's partly because of the script. And yes, Jack Black steals the show. In general, but especially with his hijacking of Lord Hater's Serenade. Hey, I get the Peaches song being so memeable because it's so simple and stupid, but almost because it is Jack Black who has so many other accomplished songs, this had better have taken him exactly 10 seconds. And somehow it has 5 writers? But I will let all of that go if we make 10,000 AMV parodies of Bowser singing You're the Greatest.
Running the galaxy side by side. It was a beautiful dream. It was a beautiful night. I had a dream. A dream that you loved me.
Okay, Bowser does have a better voice, I will give you that. You realize now that he has to sing a song in every movie. In fact, I have very, very feeble, distant hopes that the very overt positive reaction to Jack Black's Bowser might actually hypothetically encourage Illumination to have their voice actors actually voice act in the future. And I could comb through a dozen other mini details and things that I would flesh out, but generally, yeah, it's fine. It doesn't need to be a masterpiece. And I do think it's an improvement over many of Illumination's past films. And I would give credit to that to the TTG directors. They understand how to deliver a joke, and they know how to do it quickly and optimize the amount of time that they have, as past Illumination films have had problems with too much setup and not enough joke. However, the concern is that if critics and fans are lenient on this, then their sequels or other video game adaptations feel like they can be more fan service than substance as well. And again, compared to what? There is nothing that this movie destroys in the cinematic world that the Disney reboots haven't already destroyed multiple times over. But imagine if Illumination then decided to do Zelda, a much darker, lore-based story. I'm fairly certain the audience will let them know how bad a move that was. And let's not kid ourselves. The reason why this movie is making $1 billion is because it's Mario, arguably the biggest franchise on the planet. This movie could have had no advertising, no celebrities, been released in half the number of theaters with one showtime a day, even with Peach being the girl bossiest of girl bosses, kicking Mario's ass in the first 5 minutes and doing the entire movie herself, and it still would have made more money than Strange World, especially if it looks this good. So inversely, any other VG adaptation is not going to be this successful, even if it's amazing, because it's not Mario. Because the biggest VG franchises are pretty much Super Mario, Zelda, Sonic, and Pokemon. People are being nice to this movie because it's the introduction and in contrast to past crappy adaptations, which means the next one is actually going to have expectations, so fans are probably not going to be as lenient. But I guess we'll just have to see.
And I held your hand in mine, then concluded at that moment after much deliberation. I say it without hesitation, I shout it out loud, you're the greatest! Baby, you're the greatest! Oh, you're the greatest!